Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen McGowan, one of your friendly neighborhood PhDs in musicology at the UIUC School of Music. I'm here today talking with composer Hilary Purrington about a piece of hers that is premiering on the upcoming Illinois Wind Symphony concert on September the 29th. Hilary Purrington is a living composer of chamber, vocal, and orchestral music, as well as a vocalist and a versatile collaborator. Her work has received recognition from a number of national organizations, including the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, the International Alliance for Women in Music, and the National Federation of Music Clubs. She's written music performed by the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, the American Modern Ensemble, the Chicago Harp Quartet, the Yale Philharmonia, the American Composers Orchestra, the Albany Symphony, the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the Musical Chairs Chamber Ensemble. Hilary, welcome to the University of Illinois.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wonder if we could get started by having you tell us about a moment that was significant to you, or like a turning point moment for you as a young composer.
Sure. So this is going to sound really basic and elementary, but during undergrad, I was part of a summer program at the Freie Universität Berlin, and Samuel Adler, he used to teach there every summer, and I really wanted to study with him. And in our very first lesson, I showed him a chamber piece that I had written the previous year, and it was not a good piece. Let's be clear. And I showed it to him, and he listened to it, and his feedback was, "You're such a nice girl. Why are you writing music like this? Do you like this music?" And and it was the first time that anyone had ever asked me if I like my own music, and had put it out there as like a standard that I should think about and uphold. And that just forever transformed how I approach writing music, because I think, at the time I was an undergraduate. I was in a program that, included mostly graduate students. It was probably like a third undergrad, 2/3 grad. So I felt like there was this very high standard of artistry that I needed to strive to match. And in doing so, I just kind of forgot to write music that I actually liked because I had other things in mind. And having someone just kind of steer me back and say, "Hey, like, this is a fundamental, like, nothing else can happen unless you feel strongly about your music," because, as composers, we're asking other people to spend their time on our music. Like, music is a time-based art form. And if we don't feel like the music is worth our time, then we can't ask other people to invest their time in it. So it was just a really fundamental thing to be taught and understand, and just completely like rerouted me like artistically.
For the piece that University of Illinois is premiering, Apricity, what parts of it really reflect like the things you like most about your own music?
Sure. Like a strong sense of melody, color, pacing. These are all things that I really think about, especially pacing. That's something I've really tried to refine in recent years, working on transitions and how like one section leads into another, and trying to more artfully navigate and cover those seams. That's something I've really tried to do. And yeah, I really think that Apricity just kind of shows that off, and speaks to those strengths. I really loved writing all of the melodic material. I'm also a singer. I love strong singable melodies, and those definitely come through in this piece. So that's something I feel strongly about.
How did Apricity start? Like, did you, as a vocalist, come up with a melody and then sort of build a piece around it, or did a melody sort of suggest itself to you, or maybe something completely different?
Sure. So actually the first thing that I thought of was like the opening clamorous motive of the first movement of, the chimes and the piano and the percussion, and that those sounds together. I wanted to start the piece with like a bold gesture that had like the seed of a melody in it that I could then, extract something longer and more singable. So that's really where it started, was getting that motive right and getting the range right. So it all kind of sprouted from there.
Where did you get the idea for the piece in the first place? I mean, I don't know, things occur to like composers as they're walking down the street. So it might have well happened when you were walking down the street. But like, especially since a word like apricity doesn't immediately suggest like a program or like a landscape or something. How did you get the piece to where it is from like where it started?
I think initially my considerations were mostly practical, and honestly, like a lot of like the best ideas just come from thinking about being practical and writing something that's versatile. So my original idea was I think I kind of accomplished this. It doesn't have to be this, but my idea was to write a 2 movement work with a first movement that was like a little more ponderous and meandering, and then a second movement that could almost function as like an overture on a program that could potentially stand alone, just to give it, like I said, more versatility. Because I really want my music to be able to fit many kinds of circumstances and ability levels and that sort of thing. I do value that. I'm not quite sure. I think I have to hear it to like really know if like the second movement is like capable of doing like what I originally thought of. But having that general form in mind of having like, this ponderous opening movement and then this, a little more sprightly, lively, active second movement, that kind of just gave me like a really big format to like work within. And then from there, the ideas just started coming.
Since this is a premiere, what kinds of impressions or ideas are you hoping that listeners will come away with after the first performance? Especially because they probably haven't heard this piece, they haven't had a recording of this piece that they could have listened to beforehand. Or like, what do you hope will bring them back to the piece, maybe a second or a third or a fourth time?
Definitely the melodies and melodic gestures. I think both movements are very like motivically driven. So like there are like these fragments that I think are really memorable. They're, melodic fragments, but they're also marked by, the orchestration and the colors that accompany them. So I think there are like all these characteristics that kind of mark them as important. I try to be like really obvious with these things because I kind of want to control what sticks with an audience member. It's not like fully within my control, but I really try hard to like give a listener a roadmap and to kind of take them by the hand and lead them places where they may not expect to go. That's kind of what I see my role as the composer, to do. So
How has the piece changed over like the process of writing it? I'm sure it started one way, and some things may have like threads may have completely carried over into the final product. But has anything like majorly changed since you started?
mostly pacing, I would say. I think that is the biggest thing that I'm always working with and tweaking. A lot of composers will refuse to use playback in our notation software, and everyone is like free to like pursue their own compositional techniques. I think that playback is extremely useful. I usually start by writing a piece at the piano, and then I will, with pen and paper, and then I will put it into my notation software and continue refining from there. And you know, when you're sitting at the piece and like, sitting at the piano and like writing by hand, you that kind of puts you in a particular space that is not really in sync with real time. And then even if you're like sitting at the piano and like playing through the music, again, that's like also in a way not real time because you're an active participant and you're not experiencing it as a listener. Same with like conducting through it. So while playback, sounds almost nothing like the end result in so many ways, it gives such a great idea of pacing and the ability to like sit back and just like listen like almost passively is just so useful, and it really helps me refine pacing and maybe maybe a section just needs to last for another measure or two, or, a note needs to be held for a beat longer, and just being able to experience the music in a way similar to like how an audience member does just really helps me in like making those decisions.
Is pacing any different writing for wind band than it is for writing something like orchestra or chamber music? I know you've written a lot of orchestra music.
Yeah, I would say it's mostly similar to orchestra, because you also have to think about the size of the ensemble, and you have to think about how people communicate and like where people are located, you know, and then also how sound travels across that distance. And something I really like think about when I'm, making cues for the players, like, oh, who's nearby and playing. It's not as useful if like the cue is happening across the orchestra or across the wind ensemble,
Yeah.
and really thinking spatially, because like, a wind ensemble and an orchestra, like there are these big like awkward machines, and part of like the challenge is writing music that allows them to be nimble and flexible.
Yeah, if your trombone player is trying to listen for the clarinetist halfway across the room, like how
I
much are they
mean,
going to be able to do? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, sometimes that's the only option, but usually there's a better one.
Yeah. Is there anything you particularly enjoy about writing for wind band that you don't also find writing for chamber music or for orchestra?
I would say like the reliance on brass oftentimes is like a core of the ensemble. Um, that's, it can be the case in writing for orchestra, but not all the time. And just like really thinking about the brass section in just like a completely different way. And also like the greater reliance on percussion is really interesting to me, and more like unconventional percussion sounds. That's something that I've like really enjoyed exploring. Like in this piece, I added a steel drum, and I'm not like, you know, I'm not saying that an orchestral percussionist like wouldn't be open to playing that, but it just never occurred to me before. I just like, I really wanted to explore new sounds in this piece, and that kind of just opened my mind to new possibilities.
Will say band is really like open to adding experimental instruments. I don't know what it
Yes.
is about wind ensemble that it's just like, yes, please add yet another type of percussion in here. Yes, please ask my trombone players to play with 3 or 4 wildly different mutes. They all just seem to sort of be regular. Full disclosure, I trained as a trombonist. This
I
is
could kind of tell from the way you were reacting.
their wind ensemble is just really good at that, and so it's so nice to hear that a composer enjoys working with that as well. Do you have any new or upcoming projects, particularly for band, but also for chamber music? Full disclosure, I'm a big chamber music fan. Do you have any of these that you're working on or looking forward to?
So I recently wrapped up a new project for animated opera. So it's very cool to be released soon. So I wrote the music. Obviously, I did not write the libretto. My friend Hannah McDermott, a very talented librettist, did, and it was recorded by New Camerata Opera. And then they hired Catarata, an animation studio, to animate the opera. So it's really cool. It's intended for children as an audience, and it's going to be about like 14-15 minutes, so on the shorter side, but it was such a beautiful and worthwhile project. And I just saw like an initial cut of the complete project, and that's been so exciting because my friend came up with Hannah, she came up with this beautiful libretto, and then I wrote the music. And then I started seeing like sketches for the characters from the animators. And then we went into the studio and recorded it. So I heard all the voices, and it's been like this really amazing additive process of like slowly bringing this big project to life. So that is exciting. And then I'm also working on a large choral piece for the 13, a choir based in Washington, D.C. So I'm very excited about that.
Oh, that's so exciting! I can't wait to hear both of those. I don't know how far along the choral piece is. Maybe I will hear that in a couple of years, depending on what stage the
3 minutes
project is at.
music. So
Yeah. As the last thing, I know we're coming to the end of our time, but I always want to know whenever I talk to anyone who creates music as like the meat of what they do with their artistic life. What's in regular rotation on your listening list or your record player right now?
Sure. So the Verona Quartet just released a string quartet. They just released an album called Shatter, which includes a string quartet by one of my favorite composers, Rena Esmail. It also includes works by Michael Gilbertson and Julia Adolph. So like three fantastic young composers. It's a really great album, and the Verona Quartet, they're just like unparalleled. So I've been listening to that like over the past week.
Fantastic. I know what I'm going to listen to the second that I'm finished with all of my reading for this week. So, well, Hilary, thank you so much for agreeing to do our interview. And to everyone at home listening, I'll see you at the concert on the 29th.